Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to the PM Standout Candidacy event. We're gonna just wait a few minutes before we get started. While we're waiting, we're gonna be doing a free PM bootcamp giveaway. And so you can enter to win with this link here. You can also scan the QR code. So I would highly recommend doing that. You have nothing to lose and a lot to gain. And we'll get started in the next like 1 or 2 minutes. And then we'll talk about this a little more later, but feel free to drop any questions or comments you have in the chat. We've got an incredible panel today, and so between the panelists and me, we'll be able to answer a lot of the questions there. And then that can also help us guide if you have questions or like if you want to go deeper into something we're already talking about or want to spin it in a different way, that can also help inform us how to best custom this info to you. Okay, well, let's get started. Welcome everyone to the product management panel, creating a standout candidacy. You can sign up for Leland here if you have not signed up already. There'll be links at the end to sign up for the platform. So just like a few very quick logistics, we already called this out, ask questions in the chat, be respectful and supportive. And then we will be sending out recordings of this meeting. Sign up for Leland to get an email sent with access to that recording. Okay, here's a quick agenda. We'll do quick intros. We'll jump right into the panel. That's where we want the meat of this meeting to be, and then a final word. So introductions, I'm Mike. I do product at Leland, and so the team ropes me in for all product-related events. We also will have Erica and Amanda on the call. They'll be helping with some of the logistics of like sending links, etc. And then our panelists. So Lola, why don't we start with you, and then we can jump to Vaibhav and Daniel.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Lola. I'm a product manager at Stripe, based in the UK, and I coach on Leland to support people going through product management transitions, looking to break into product from different industries and the like. So excited to chat more about my background and experiences over the next hour. I'll pass it to Vaibhav.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Vaibhav. I'm a product manager at Microsoft. I'm currently based in Austin, Texas. But yeah, kind of just help non-traditional candidates transition into PM. Go for it, Daniel.
Awesome. I'm Daniel. I was a PM at Uber before I started my own company. I before that was at the University of Texas at Austin with Vaibhav. Similarly, love coaching students and people from non-traditional backgrounds so that they can break into product management, and excited to have this discussion today. Back to you, Mac.
Yeah. Also, these are incredible coaches. We have thousands of coaches on Leland, hundreds of product management coaches, and these are 3 coaches who have done very well. So we'd love to hear from you. So drop in the chat. We'd love to know where you're at. Are you working, studying? And then because this is a product management event, what's your current favorite product? So yeah, drop in the chat. We can wait to see some of them come in, and then we'll get going from there. Okay, we got, all right, some Citibank, John Hopkins, favorite product is fitness app. Great. Plan to eat. Okay, another healthy one. That's great. We'll let those keep coming in. This is really helpful for us to know, like generally where are people at? How are they, thinking through product? Okay, while those are coming in, just very quickly, if you are not familiar with Leland, would love to just quickly explain what is Leland. So primarily, Leland is a place where you can find expert coaches like these three incredible coaches we have on the panel, and you can work with them in a one-on-one capacity to help you achieve your goals, whether that's breaking into product, leveling up as a product manager, or also, get into school, taking a test. We have over 50 different categories. Additionally, and we'll talk about this a little later, we've created a series of boot camps where we go take some of our best coaches on the platform and we create a curriculum for common goals, like the break into product management boot camp or break into consulting boot camp. And then we do free events like the one you are on today. If this is your first time attending an event, once you sign up for Leland, we will continue to send you other relevant events. Great. And more than anything, it's working. I'm actually a former Leland customer. I used Leland to apply to business school and then got accepted to Harvard. And I'm also a coach, and my clients have landed roles at companies like Google and LinkedIn, Robinhood, etc. And we have every year tens of thousands of people who are achieving their goals on Leland, many of whom have worked with coaches like these three. So here are just some of the things that your coach can work with you on, but hopefully you can start to see the value of the coach's expertise as we jump into this panel. So let's get started with our very first question. Daniel, why don't we start with you? Actually, I would love to hear from all three panelists on this one. Yeah, how did you land in product management? Tell us about that process.
I can still start, I guess. So yeah, my process is the first kind of inkling that I heard about it. I was interning at Facebook in an operational role, nothing really related to product. And I encountered someone who I later learned was a product manager who came in and basically looked at the work I was doing to do a lot of analytics on problems that Facebook was having, and said, hey, we're going to make these proactive changes in the product and roll them out and experiment them and see if that fixes the thing that you've been looking at. And I was really excited by that because it just seemed like a really interesting mix of both analysis as well as proactive design and building. And it really matched a lot of the goals that I had to eventually become an entrepreneur. So that was the first I heard of it. Landing the role was much harder because I just didn't know that many people at the time who had any real inkling of what product was. Interviewed a ton, mock interviewed a ton, got very few interviews for the product management internships at the time. Managed to get one product management internship offer at HomeAway, now Verbo. And that was really my first inkling as landing the role. From there, kind of learned how to do the job, met a lot of other product managers who helped me with things like the resume, like the interviews, and ended up interviewing for APM programs. So I'm happy to talk about APM programs at length. I ended up joining Uber's after a lengthy interview process that I'm sure you all have been able to read about. But it's something that I would say pretty confidently I would not be able to have gotten without help from people who have done the job before, and without a ton of support from friends and from peers who were gracious enough to do hundreds probably of mock interviews at the time, just so I could get better and better and more comfortable with going through the really unique process that is interviewing for and becoming a product manager. So that's a bit of my story. I'll pass it on to whoever wants to go next.
I can go next if that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I kind of came from a world of like startups, working in a bunch of different startups, in different technical roles. And I'd say back then it wasn't as popular product management. So I actually heard it from one of my friends who was like, "Oh, you should explore this." And at that time I was like, I have no idea what this is. But yeah, I explored it some more, and then in the next recruiting cycle, I got an internship at Samsung as a TPM, technical product manager. And that was super helpful just for me to transition from role to role, but also set me up really well for full-time recruiting. And that was kind of where I landed my role at Microsoft. Been on two different teams since joining Microsoft, so I can tell you about switching teams and all of that. And yeah, love to just like give back, help other people. Actually, Daniel is one of the people that helped me land my first PM role. Funnily enough, we both went to UT, Hookham. But yeah, so yeah, just excited to give back. And Lola.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I would say I've had maybe a little bit of a windy path in product management. So I started my career at McKinsey as a consultant after college, spent a few years there, was really not focused on anything super tech related, but just got sort of the, classic consulting sort of skill set. After some time, I actually wanted to move abroad to the UK. So my transition into tech was actually prompted by that geographic move. And I landed at a startup called Deliveroo, like a DoorDash or Uber Eats competitor, focused on the European region. And my first job there was a product strategy role. So I was focused on thinking about how we could improve our monetization strategies on different products that we had, and just sort of being in the right place at the right time. That role very quickly transformed into what you would describe as a product management role. So that was my first experience sort of wearing the hat of product manager, coming up with a roadmap, figuring out what needed to get done to sort of drive value for our users and for the business. So it was a bit of like a forced rotation of sorts. But after some time at Deliveroo, I just decided that it wasn't the right fit for me culturally anymore, and was looking at different opportunities to still pursue sort of product as a path, but not within that company. So I ended up applying to the Meta RPM program, which some of you might be aware of, the Rotational Product Manager program, and was successful in that process, which was quite the arduous one. But again, sort of life threw a wrench. At that time, I was expecting to move back to the US. And then, due to some personal circumstances, I actually decided I wanted to stay in London. And unfortunately, wasn't able to switch my offer to be in London. So I had to give that up. So again, I was sort of back in sort of a product strategy role when I was joining Stripe. And I would say a similar process happened of, again, just sort of raising my hand, really excited about doing more of the core product management role, and was able to transition within Stripe. And I think that's sort of what I'd like to talk through today. So a bit of a windy path, but have been always sort of wearing the hat, taking it off over the last few years.
That's great. I love all the different examples. Obviously, or at least I hope it is obvious that there's no clear one path to product. And there are many different ways to do it. And so hopefully we can talk through several of those ways and kind of best practices with each of them. And then it felt like, or at least what I was hearing is the other big takeaway is that it's hard. I think all three of you talked about how arduous the recruiting process was. So we'll also talk about that more later. Okay, why don't we jump to Vaibhav? Product management roles are extremely competitive. How can someone differentiate themselves or stand out in the process?
Yeah, for sure. I think especially even now, it's more competitive than it was, a few years ago or whatnot when I was looking for roles. But I think a few different things. So I know a lot of people gravitate towards the different kind of courses and whatnot, but I really like whenever candidates differentiate themselves with projects, personal projects. Doesn't have to be technical in nature, even something as simple as just choosing an app that you like or don't like, a product you like, don't like, and just redesigning it, even if it's just a couple pages of sketches or Figma, wireframes. I think anything like that can help stand out. And then second, I think standing out, it doesn't necessarily have to be technical or product management oriented, just anything that creates an impact. So for me, one of the things that really stood out was putting on large campus-wide events when I was at UT, like reaching over 5,000 people. Obviously not developing the same thing as developing a product, but definitely has a large scale impact, a lot of stuff related to releasing and whatnot. So yeah, so that's kind of what I would say.
Yeah, that's great. I think there's so much power in having projects. And something that's been shocking to me as I've been involved with more and more of these events, it feels like that is like the common thread that a lot of people talk about in helping them get the interview is whether it's a self-initiated project or a startup or like some other small group they get involved with, they're able to build something, and it feels like companies really gravitate towards that. Daniel, Lola, anything you would add?
I just want to reinforce and reemphasize what Vaibhav said, and Mike, it's exactly right. I think the thing that I often come across, and a lot of the coaching that I will tell people when they're like, how do I stand out or how do I make this resume better, is I talk about what kinds of qualities people are typically looking for in a product manager. And I think there's a level of you can be taught and you can learn a lot of the traits of either the technical abilities, how to communicate with developers, how to effectively look for good design, how to do analysis and data analysis in particular. But leadership is something that I look at as, okay, well, if this person is an incredible, inspiring leader and communicator, I'm willing to make excuses for whether they might not be as proficient in those other technical skills, not typically the other way around. So the reason we often call that out and say like, hey, if you're looking to stand out, literally go do something impressive, or emphasize the things that you have already done that are really impressive and unique. It's because that's often what makes a great product manager and what distinguishes a PM, rather than their incredible abilities on a Figma document, or their outstanding ability to code, both of which are things that I frankly really lacked before I was a product manager.
Totally. Yeah, 2 years ago, I was working with several clients at the same time. One of them was for anonymity's sake, I like won't give too many details, but they went to a very prestigious school studying computer science and were really, really struggling to even get an interview. Then I had another client who went to a school that you'd likely never heard of. And in a lot of ways and did not have a technical background at all, but they had this Etsy shop where they had sold like 20K worth of t-shirts and was able to spin that in a really cool story of like, I found this niche, was able to build a product to address that niche well. And like she got so many interviews despite the on paper less impressive background because of the way she was able to emphasize like the cool things that she had done. That's a great comment. Okay, let's jump to the next question. Lola, why don't we start with you? What do you think are the most important skills for inspiring PM to learn?
Yeah, I think maybe a nice segue from the anecdote you just shared. One that really jumps to mind is storytelling and communication. I think people hear the phrase storytelling quite a lot and don't even really know what that means. It's kind of like a everything phrase. What I think about when I hear the word storytelling is really the ability for you to effectively communicate a story about yourself in a compelling fashion. And I think that's what people forget to really hone in the interview process quite often. And it's going to be one of the most important skills that you actually have to have every day in the job. So when you think about what stories you want to tell about a time that you had a challenging experience or had to work with a team or had to, navigate ambiguity, the classic questions that you would expect, don't think about them as just sort of transactional, like check the box exercises. It's really an opportunity for you to showcase how you can communicate in almost an inspirational way, to share those anecdotes from your past. So that's one. I think one that sort of goes along with it is just having some sort of, I would say, honed point of view on product itself. So you might hear the phrase like product sense. There's interviews that these companies do to evaluate your product sense, and it is really building an intuition for how you understand products and why they are good or bad, why they've been designed in a certain way, why the business is making certain decisions about delivering products in that fashion. I think that's something that is so learnable. I think some people see product sense as this like weird sparkly thing that you either have or don't have, but it is really just a skill that you can build over time by evaluating more products, looking at products closely and noticing the details. And I think that when I think about the interviews that have gone, the most well for people in my own experiences interviewing people or doing mocks with people out, on Leland, those are the two things that really cut people, ahead above. So I feel like you can do those things in your day-to-day job and outside of your job, pretty easily, and sort of make sure that you're in a good position on those dimensions.
Yeah, that's so good. My PM coach when I was recruiting for product like 4 or 5 years ago told me to go and for every app on my phone, to write out a list of like, what is it doing well and how would I improve it? And like spent hours doing that just to build that skill. Okay, Daniel Vibhav, anything that you would add as in other skills or other ways of developing the skills that were already mentioned?
Yeah, I'll go first. Yeah, if that's okay. Daniel, please run top of my mind. Yeah, I think Lola definitely hit the nail on the coffin that like communication is super important. But I think something that's kind of overlooked a lot of times is just the amount of like sheer emails and documents that are, messages that are shared on a day-to-day basis. The non, cool, glorified part of the job, I guess. And for that, I think writing, concisely is like super important, communicating concisely, not just through words like speaking orally, but also just through writing documents, emails, whatnot. So I think any way you can improve your writing skill, generally speaking, is probably whether that means writing articles, writing essays, I don't know. But yeah, any way you can improve that, I think is definitely super helpful because you're probably more likely to do that on a day-to-day basis than, give a presentation or a talk. That might be on like a weekly basis, but that's kind of what I would say.
Yeah, that's very true. Very, very true.
I think the last thing I'll add is one of the other core aspects of being a product manager is that you're a gap filler. So it's incredibly important that you have really rigorous prioritization abilities. This is super true for a lot of jobs, but like especially in a PM role where in no small part you are prioritizing things for your team. So just having a real clear sense as to what is most important to the business and to the team and to the individual role of whoever you're talking to is incredibly important. It's something that you will often actually end up showing off in an interview of just what do you prioritize talking about? What do you prioritize building in this hypothetical? Like a lot of the more I do coaching, the more I realize like a ton of these questions are in fact intentional. They are asking for the kinds of skills, whether it's storytelling, prioritization, product sense, that are going to differentiate you and make you a valuable member of the team. So it does matter to become good at them, both to be successful in the interviews and to be successful in the job.
Totally. Yeah, very, very good. Um, Maybe just like one really quick follow-up because this is really important. So yes, prioritization is like the thing, like really those things, communication. Actually, at Atlassian, I had done their APM program and they had this whole doc of what they were looking for. And these were the three exact skills, which was good communicator, good product sense, and then like good at like taking initiative, being a gap filler, and then sorry, the last one was prioritization and like what is good, what can we do later. Any thoughts on like, okay, I want to get better at prioritizing things. How would you go about doing that? And yeah, from all three of you, I don't know if there's anyone who has thoughts.
Lola, why don't you go first?
Um, could you rephrase the question? I just want to make sure I'm answering the right points.
Yeah, just like imagine you're working with a client and you do mock interviews every time they're struggling to like prioritize like what do we build? How do I prioritize like this versus another feature? What would you recommend to them?
Yeah, that's fair. So I think a framework can actually be quite useful here. And I know, on certain interviews, I'm kind of anti-framework. So if you ever work with me, you'll hear me say like kind of release the framework. But prioritization, I think there's quite a few frameworks that are quite useful here. I think one that I'll just throw out is like feasibility versus impact. So how quickly can you build something? How quickly will you start to see results from that thing that you've built? There are things that will require a lot of time to build that will give you really massive impact, sort of longer term type bets. There are things that might require, not a lot of time to build, but you might start to see, small impact quite fast as well. So having a sense of like what is the difficulty rating for the thing that you're trying to do and how important it is to driving an outcome for the product that you're trying to improve or a problem that you're trying to solve for your user is quite important. So I think that just having a few of those back pocket is quite useful when you get a question like that.
Yep, super great. Okay, let's move on for time's sake. All right, this is a question we get all the time, which is like PM interviews are hard. How do I prepare for or ensure that I can nail the PM interview? All right, Vaibhav, why don't you lead us, and then Daniel, Lola, if there's anything you want to add.
Yeah, few different things I would say. So with PM interviews, I think unless you're already naturally like super good at interviewing and that kind of cadence. I think mock interviews are essential. And that might be a different number of mock interviews needed for each person, for each role, whatnot, but mock interviews definitely essential. If we're talking about just the interview aspect. And the second thing is just understanding the different types of potential questions you could face. Obviously there's an exception to all the frameworks and whatnot, but project sense, project analytical, project execution, estimation questions, technical, system design, whatever, like bucking them out and then kind of addressing those one by one, is I think super helpful. And then beyond that, I mean, getting feedback. Feedback is super important just from your peers, and whatnot. And I know for some people it may be really hard, like timing wise, to get a bunch of time to schedule, let's say 30 mocks, right? If each one's a half an hour, that's like 15 hours of mocks. So one thing I would say is if you're short on time, just do like one mock and then find a bunch of questions, take 5 minutes and then answer it like by yourself, whiteboard out your answer, and then take, a day or whatever, look back on all your answers and look at that feedback and kind of a critical lens. But yeah, I don't know if Daniel or Lola, y'all have anything to add.
Yeah, I think one small thing I'll add, and it was something that I think both Mike and Lola covered, is questions are great and questions are helpful for just getting practice. And Lord knows, like 90% of what I did to prepare for my first PM interviews was just mocking and bugging my friends to help me mock out loud. But I think the other core thing that is a much more passive activity that you can kind of be doing all the time is when a tech product rolls out an update or when something that you use changes in some way, ask yourself why they did it and do the exercise of like, do I like this change? Do I not like this change? And why? And I think it's a really interesting way to kind of get your brain turning passively and make a lot of the answers that might be good because you're using the right framework and you're communicating well into a great answer of, oh, I understand why certain tech companies do the things they do. Like it's never random. There's almost always a product manager behind the choice. So like being able to very clearly communicate, here's why this thing happened is going to help you a ton in every kind of interview setting where you can then go and say, oh, I can rely on this previous example where I saw it in person, either explicitly saying that or just relying upon the knowledge that you gain by doing that analysis every single day. Is a really helpful way to get used to it and get used to these kinds of problems.
I'll just add one quick thought, or maybe two quick thoughts. One, I think, is just really having your stories down pat. I think maybe Bob alluded to that. So the narrative that you want to sort of get across in the interviews, feeling super confident about that as well. And the second, which I think sometimes people discount, is taking time to come up with interesting questions for the interviewer. I think that can be something that sort of isn't like cherry on top if you've had a really great interview and you're able to leave the interviewer with some insightful or specifically thoughtful questions.
Last thing, Mike, I promise I'll keep it short. This is something I say in every panel, and I just want to like really emphasize it. Get sleep before your interview. Be a human in the interview. Like if you can make your interviewer laugh, that is usually going to be a very good interview. So I know there's an incredible amount of resources both on Leland and outside of it for preparing for all of the possible interview questions that you will ever get. But most of the quality that you will gain, most of like the grade you will gain will be by presenting yourself well and as someone who can be inspirational, optimistic member of that team. So like get a good amount of sleep if you're actually going into the interview tomorrow or whatever time, and do whatever it is to make yourself de-stressed before you get to that interview so that you can be your whole wonderful, unique self before.
Yeah, these are such good thoughts. I remember pretty early on in my PM recruiting process, I got asked the question, tell me every reason you can think of why a traffic cone has a hole in the top of it. Like clearly a question that like you never could have prepared for, but they just wanted you on the spot to think through like, well, maybe when you hit it, like it needs a way for air to escape, or maybe it's like, so you can stack them, or it makes it easier to grab. Like you just have to like think of it on the spot. And I think that's one of the big differences between product or say software engineering, management consulting, etc., is the hard skill that you are being graded on is critical thinking and communication. Even though those like aren't really hard skills. So it's not like I can go do 100 leak code questions and then be ready for any interview. It's like, I need to go figure out how to think well. And that can be done through mocks, that can be done like through all the things you talked about of like just wondering why did this update happen, sleeping so that my brain can actually think well in the interview. Like really, really good advice. Okay, we're moving a little slow, so why don't we just take one panelist? Lola, why don't you take this one? What are some ways aspiring PMs can gain relevant experience to build their resume and get their foot in the door?
Yeah, of course. So I think two pieces here. One is like in your current sort of formal role, and then two is in whatever informal time you have outside of your formal role if you're not a student. So one in your formal role, I think this is a tried and true path. If you're at a technology type company and in a non-product role, you can very much try and work with people to create a set of tasks or a portfolio of work that is more product shaped. Different companies have different approaches for this. Some are more informal, where you might just say like, hey, I want to sort of, take some stuff off your plate, product manager X, can you please help me sort of figure out what I should be doing here? And I think if you're sort of high agency and proactive and actually, enthusiastic, people are very receptive to that. So I think that's one path. I think the second is sort of outside of work and maybe more what Vaibhav was talking about earlier. Do you have any space for projects that sort of mimic the set of skills that you would want as a product manager? So whether you're just exploring products that you think are interesting and writing about that, or doing teardowns and sharing that, or if you're actually, building your own product for a problem that you have, even if it's quite small scale. I think there's a lot more, or I would say a lot less barrier to entry, particularly on the latter with, AI tools and like lots of different applications that allow you, even if you're not super technical, to sort of put something into the world and see how people respond to it. So I would say those are two buckets of things that you guys can explore.
That's really good. There was a comment in the chat that said, how do you show like a collab thing in your resume?
Yeah, so I think really tactically, if that's the question, it's just describing the set of tasks that you actually completed. So let's say that you were, in the finance team at a company, but you're really interested in transitioning to product. You spoke to a product manager and said, hey, I'd really like to, get some exposure. Can I help you with a user research program for this new feature that you're looking to launch? And then there you would just sort of do the set of tasks that you would need to accomplish to do a successful user research program. And then you would just sort of describe that in your resume, just like that. I supported product team to execute user research for, X users to help us validate Y product. I think that's kind of where you're able to just really articulate exactly what you did. And the recruiter should have sort of the ability to map that to the set of skills that they're looking for in a candidate. So happy to, talk about those things in more detail, but that directionally is how I would consider it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's exactly right. I think I have a friend, she started off as a dental hygienist and said, I don't want to be a dental hygienist. And so she went and started working at a company that provided software for dental offices, and she started off doing customer support for them. And then given her dental hygienist experience and her time in support, she started knowing a ton about like, hey, here's actually what people want. So she started working a lot with product and then switched into a product role. And that was like so fascinating to me, the way she was just able to kind of like work her way there, but use like this initiative she had, her unique understanding of customers to like work her way over. That's great. Okay, we're just going to quickly talk about the PM boot camp, and then later we'll give away who the winner is of the free entry. So we haven't talked about this as much, but PM interviews are so hard. Here are some of the different types of interviews you could get asked. So well, I guess step one is like you got to get the interview. You get asked questions like, what's your favorite product and why? There's like product design interviews, things like how would you improve YouTube? How would you improve Reddit, etc. You'll sometimes get these execution interviews like, how should Amazon enter the food delivery market? Or how should Uber enter the music market? Just like these ridiculous questions, and they want to see how you'd think about it. There's take-home assignments that can really be anything. And then technical or analytical interviews as well. And then the whole behavioral side of telling your story. So what we've done is we've gone to some of the best coaches on Leland and had them specialize in like, okay, you're going to do a 90-minute deep dive in each of these topics. And then we've stitched it together into a series of coaching sessions. So this is what the boot camp is. It's 12 hours of instruction. You get 6 mock interviews of other people in the boot camp. There's like assignments, homework, drills given. There's coaching discounts, and then access to our content library, which is Leland Plus. It goes for $7.99, so you can purchase it there. Again, if you have not entered to win the giveaway, this is like the second call out to enter it. Again, you lose nothing, but a lot to gain. Okay, with that quick ad done, let's jump back into the panel. Vaibhav, why don't we pass it to you, and then Daniel, if you want to add anything, what are some common mistakes that you see candidates make during the recruiting process?
Yeah, so I think there's kind of one that stands out in my mind as a coach, especially for people from non-traditional backgrounds, is before they even enter the recruiting process, like properly, they already are like discounting themselves, or undermining themselves as a good potential candidate. Obviously, there's many mistakes people can make, in the actual process, maybe not spending enough time on the resume, or maybe not, interviewing enough, or maybe not spending enough time, as Daniel and Lola were saying, like analyzing different products, so you build that product sense, that critical thinking. But I think, yeah, one of the biggest ones, especially if you are not having much luck with product and you feel like you're not the correct fit, quote unquote, for product, I think a lot of people discount themselves and maybe don't look at their past experience and be like, oh, how can this be like repurposed? Or maybe there's a different aspect of it that could be used in a product-y way, or in some aspect to demonstrate some aspect of product management. So yeah, I think maybe that just takes looking at a deep dive. Maybe once you already have a better understanding of product management, or maybe even it takes a mentor or a coach, someone that you trust to kind of look over that. But yeah, that's kind of the top thing that I would say. Beyond that, I think not spending enough time on the resume. I think people jump a lot to the interviews, and the interviews are important. I'm not saying they're not. It's obviously a very rigorous interviewing process, but like 100%, well, not 100%, but like 97% of people are like rejected at the resume round. So 100%, like definitely focus on the resume. Get it reviewed by multiple people, definitely like iterate on it. Just as you would, I guess, almost like a product. But yeah, that's kind of what I would say. I don't know if Daniel or Laura have anything to add.
Big +1 to everything Vaibhav said. I'm still waiting for someone to give me a resume to review on the Leland platform where I don't find like a good number of things that I want to improve. And I'm hoping that comes at some point, because like it is so important. I'm hoping I get one where I'm like, yeah, no notes, like this really looks phenomenal. But I think at some level, at some core level, to really link the two threads that Vaibhav's talking about, one of the hardest things to do is to talk about why you're incredible. It's not a thing that is super rewarded in a lot of societal senses. So working with a coach is a great way to kind of bring out, hey, you are super duper impressive. Like these are things that I saw on the resume that I would love to see you present in a different way. And even if you don't go with a Leland coach, just asking friends and working with people so that they can get a sense of the things that you have done and then how they would reframe them as impressively as possible is a really, really helpful exercise. I think one of the only other mistakes that I kind of thought of, or a couple of them, one is not leveraging your network and kind of feeling afraid to do that. I think there are a lot of students and a lot of prospective applicants that do a really good job of this, and there are some that don't do it at all. As long as you're comfortable doing it, it's a really good idea to reach out to people in your network who work at companies that have open roles, to reach out to anyone you're connected with on LinkedIn who has a product role. You'd be really shocked at how willing people are if you engage with them as a person or try to find points of similarity with them, that how willing they'll be to help. And then the second one, much more interview specific. I think there's a over reliance on frameworks that I find for a lot of people who are preparing, and for questions that are like, how many or why is there a hole in a traffic cone? please, I beg of you, don't try to foist a framework on that kind of question. Like, be really, really ready to discard all of these wonderful frameworks that you've spent hours getting really good at so that you can answer the question in the best possible way. Or if you get a product related question and you have a unique answer to it that doesn't perfectly follow the framework that you've previously used, go with that one, right? Like, so much of what we're testing is not your mastery of frameworks, because the open secret is that doesn't really come up nearly as much when you're actually doing the job. It's your ability to rigorously and critically think through problems and then communicate that on the spot to the person that you're talking to.
Yeah, that's so good. Lola, anything you'd add?
No, not really. I was going to mention the same thing. So great
Awesome.
advice.
One final thought, something I see all the time. In fact, 9 out of 10 times when I get a client and they say, I've applied to 100 places and I don't get any interviews. What's going on? Like the spray and pray approach of like, I'm just going through LinkedIn, seeing what I can find, throwing my resume, like just does not work. You usually want to be like very thoughtful of, I'm going to build a relationship with this company. I'm going to get a referral. I'm going to apply within the first 24 to 48 hours of like the application opening. Frankly, especially for these more competitive PM roles, that's like your only shot. And so being really thoughtful about preparing in advance of building the relationship is sometimes understated in how important it is. Okay, yeah, just would love to hear. You've all helped a lot of people. So generally, when you are coaching, what do you find to be the most valuable to your clients, or how have you helped people in the past?
I
Oh,
can
sorry, I didn't ask anyone specifically. Lola, do you want to take it away?
Sure, I can talk. So I think the way that I've worked with my clients in the past has really been around like very tactical refinement of their storytelling. So someone who asks you the question, tell me about yourself. When someone asks you the question, tell me about yourself, there's like 1,000 different ways you can answer that question. And I think there's ways that are genuinely more effective and more impactful than other ways. And so when I work with my clients, I think question by question, I really want to refine the way in which that they're sort of, yeah, communicating with the interviewer, landing the core points of their narrative, and having the interviewer walk away with like unambiguous clarity that they're the right fit for the role. And so that looks like just a lot of mock interviews, a lot of very specific and detailed feedback on wording and phrasing, a lot of detailed and specific questions to get the clients to like push further where they can sort of provide more context in a situation that they've described in a high level. So I would say it's like quite granular when I'm thinking about the sort of behavioral side of the interview process. And I think on the more, let's say, functional type questions, so a product sense or execution or design, it is really just trying to like give them questions that they wouldn't necessarily expect in the context of the company that they're interviewing for. I think that just gives you a broader scope of like at bats that you've done. So let's say you're interviewing with Meta, like I don't want to only give you questions that are about like Instagram. Like you should also be able to answer questions about Stripe and payments, because that just gives your brain more context of the different possibilities and the directions that you could go down. I think one thing that I've also noticed in my clients is like sometimes people are just missing language. Like they have like the intuition for what sort of questions or what sort of answers they're supposed to be giving, but they don't necessarily have the right like technical language. Like, is it a user story? Is it a persona? Is it, a design thing? Like all these sorts of, I would say, more technical pieces of jargon that actually do make you sound a little bit more like you know what you're talking about, depending how you use them. So trying to help clients sort of identify where they can bolster their responses in that way. So those are some of the specific strategies that I like to use.
That's so great. Daniel, anything you would add here?
I think one small thing, I think Lola alluded to it, is the idea that, every client's needs are a little different. So something that I've tried very hard, and I think the best coaches here, Vaibhav and Lola included, will often do is they'll be very responsive to the needs that you have, right? So if you come to me and say, I have an interview tomorrow and I really need to get this take-home assignment done, what things would you recommend? I'm not going to sit there and say, well, first buy my package and secondly, we'll review a resume. Like I'll get right down into the details of whatever exercise you have. And then if you come to me and you say, hey, I need this specific help on this specific interview question, and I notice certain threads of how we can work together to be better as a communicator overall, I'll say that very upfront, and I'll try to be as transparent as I possibly can about the ways that I can help. But I think the wonderful thing about working with a coach that is very different from getting a load of courses or trying to do it on your own is it's something that can be much more responsive, right? It's someone who can actually be there and try to find out what is the best way for us to go about improving your chances throughout the process, no matter where you are in the process, whether that's right before a final interview or whether that's I've barely heard of product, I think I want to do it, how do I start?
That's so good. Yeah, I sometimes feel like with my clients, it's like this logic tree. If they come in, they're not getting interviews. It's like, okay, could it be this? No. All right, is it this? Is it this? It's so hard in a group event like this to like perfectly diagnose. Here's the perfect solution for everyone. Okay, Vaibhav, anything you want to add, or should we move to the next question?
Yeah, I'll just add one thing real quick. I think before I even get to the working with the client, and whatnot, I think I myself try to evaluate if I'm really the best fit for the client as a coach. I like to think that I'm pretty good, but I'm definitely not the best fit for everyone. And so I think that's kind of one of the things that I try to figure out, at least in the intro call, like, okay, given your experience, where you're at with the process, where you are in your career, like, am I really the best fit? And can I actually be of value that's worth your time and money?
Yep, that's so good. All right, okay, let's wrap it up with this like final question from here. If there's any other Q&A, we can take some of that. Why don't we actually do each of the panelists here? Okay, final piece of advice for the audience members, like what would you say about breaking into product in general? You can be as specific or as high level as you want. Why don't we start with Daniel, then we can do Lola and finish with Vaibhav.
I'm actually stealing a little bit from Mike and something that he said in a panel. So hopefully he has a second one that he can share. But it's really hard. Like it's been said multiple times. And like any good sales or recruiting process, it's going to be a low percentage game. Like be very ready to get a lot more rejections than you get acceptances. Even if you're the most amazing candidate in the world from a target school who's way better at coding than I am, who has a PM internship, like all of those things being true, you're still going to get more rejections than you are actual offers. So get ready for that. And I think like stay encouraged however you can. Working with a coach is a great way to do that because I'll be the first one to tell you, like, I got a ton of rejections. This is just how it goes. And also respond to it. Don't just be optimistic and hope. Like do your best to keep on applying, keep on doing all the things that get you into a better position, because so many other clients are not going to do, or sorry, so many other applicants rather are not going to do all of that work, are going to get discouraged, are going to not have as good of an idea as to what they should do to prepare. So understand that it's a long game, it's a hard one. You're going to get a lot of no's, but overall, that's a really wonderful skill and thing to be comfortable with in literally any role, but especially in product.
That's awesome. Great. Lola?
Yeah, I think what comes to mind for me is knowing your strengths. So really knowing what you're good at and why you're good at it and leveraging your strengths as much as you can. So, we've talked about sort of net new product management roles, like moving to a new company, but think about where you can leverage your strengths in your existing company to transition into something that feels more like product management that then makes the next thing a bit easier. So just think about, what can you change within the context of your current state without needing to go far outside? Those transitions can sometimes be easier. Second is just be confident. I think, as Daniel said, this can be a very difficult transition to make. And I think in the whole process, retaining just a strong sense of self-confidence and like knowing that you know your stuff and you're putting your best foot forward will make your performance much better. You'll come off much more effectively. So I know, be confident is something lots of people say, but it is something that you should try and intuit as best as you can. I think the last one is like maybe just check in, like, are you enjoying this? Like, why do you want to do product management? I think that sometimes people just get latched on to this idea of like this job and it's going to solve all their problems. If they just get that offer, you will get a bunch of new problems if you become a product manager. So I think just really check in with yourself about what is motivating you to do this process and why you think this is the right career option for you. Those would be my three pieces to leave you with.
Yeah, that's so good. I mean, it can be so discouraging, and it's obviously not a silver bullet. Really great answers. Okay, Vaibhav, bring us home.
Yeah, I kind of just want to second actually Lola's last point. The two things I was going to say was, yeah, figure out your motivation. And this is honestly with a lot of things in life, but really figure out your motivation for doing, why you want to recruit for product management, because you will experience a lot of rejections. You will go through potentially like mentally like a lot of tough times, potentially. But if you know the reasons why you want to pursue product management, and hopefully, there are great reasons, then I think you'll be just a lot more confident and you'll be able to get through those humps. I think, most people are able to learn, how to interview and, these different skills and whatnot. But I think, as Daniel was saying, a lot of people just give up or just, take their foot off the pedal like halfway through or, at some point in the middle, and they never actually see themselves like land that role. But yeah, yeah, uh, know your motivation, I guess.
Yeah, that's so great. Something that I've said on past events like this and to clients. Like I have this vivid memory of being like 10 years old, and I'm in the shower and I was like thinking about how I could make the shower handle better. I'd taken a Sharpie and marked where the perfect line of like, if I move the shower head there, it will be the perfect temperature. It's like, what if we could build a handle that aligns perfectly? And then when I learned like there's a job where this is what I get to do all day is like think through how to solve or problems like this or make people's lives better. I was so excited. I'm like, this is like the perfect job for me. And in a lot of ways, product is awesome. But then I remember I remember when I heard how hard PM recruiting was, and there was these crazy stats like, 20,000 people apply to the Meta RPM program and they accept like 10, right? I mean, I don't know how many they accept. You're like, oh, that's like a 0.1% acceptance rate. What? Like, I have no chance. And then very quickly you learn like, oh, if you just do a little bit and you're thoughtful about it and you're intentional, you can like immediately start to become one of like the top decile applicants. And like also there's like so many different options and different fits. And so it's like this balance between like knowing what you want, not getting discouraged as you pursue what you actually want. That's such good advice. Okay. We are now going to announce the bootcamp entry winner who gets the free bootcamp. I'm going to drop it in the chat. It's a Timi Bello or Timi Bayo. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. Oh, thanks, Amanda, for dropping it. Okay, so very congrats. And then also huge thank you to our panelists for joining. Lola is joining from far away and it is very late for her. So we're grateful to have her joining the call. And then also Daniel and Vaibhav for joining. All of your thoughts and answers were so insightful. So if you want to drop in the chat and give them some love. And then if you have any questions about Leland or coaching, you can set up a call with the Leland team here. And yeah, so good luck with the whole process. I hope this was helpful. If you have any feedback on how we can make these events more helpful for you in the future, feel free to let us know.
Are we allowed to ask questions now?
Yeah, we got a few minutes. So why don't we just take like 3 or 4 questions and then panelists, as long as you're okay answering them, we can go till the end of the hour. Yeah, Matthew, do you want to start us off then?
Sure. Lola, you talked about why do you want to be a PM? And this is like an entirely new field for me. I'm a software engineer, but I haven't really thought about getting into PM. And the way that you talked about that shower handle problem was something that like I really resonated with. So like for the people who are already established, for the people who already work as a PM, like what was the motivation originally for you guys to become a PM?
Anyone want to take it away?
I can go first, maybe. I think Mike talked about the shower handle, so I was very inspired by his childhood dream to be a PM. I think for me, I just really, really care about I really enjoy solving problems. Like that sounds very sort of milk toast, but I would say that I genuinely just care about solving problems. I find that to be very fun, and that's a natural tendency that I have. I'm quite passionate about design. So I'm not a designer, but I am the sort of PM archetype that spends a lot of time in Figma, sweats the details quite a lot. And that's a space that I actually get a lot of energy. And so for me, like being more on, let's say, the business and product strategy side, I felt like I wasn't able to sort of flex that side of my brain that is an area that really gives me a lot of joy and excitement. Obviously, not all products are very, front end and pixel heavy. There's lots of different types of products, back-end products, API products, et cetera. But for me, that was just something that I knew that I had sort of an internal passion about, and just wanted to spend more and more time solving those sorts of problems. And then lastly, I think it's just a really fun job if you like working with people. Like you just can't do anything by yourself as a product manager. You need to work with your engineers, designers, business people, legal, depending what type of product you have. And so I think for me, the combination of those three things and being in, tech, like product is kind of the only job that checks all those boxes for me. So yeah, that's kind of my why, and what I've really enjoyed in the role. I'll pass it to Daniel for Vibe if you want to answer.
I want us to be able to answer more questions, and Lola said it significantly better than I possibly could. But yeah, I love solving really big problems with really cool people. There's nothing that gives me more energy. And so a lot of people look at PMs and go, "How do you stay in meetings all day?" Like especially engineers, will take that look. And also because my day is different every single day, and because I truly love interacting with people, especially when we're in the weeds trying to solve really difficult problems. And that truly is what a product manager does when they're most activated. So that's what appealed to me about the role.
So good. All right, for the sake of time,
Thank you.
any other questions that people have?
I saw a question in the chat. I'll try to answer really briefly. This is from Frederick, and he asked, is it important for people to be more generalist or have certain domain experience when hiring for entry-level or PM internship? I'd love for Vaibhav or Lola or Mike to contradict me on this one, but really quickly, I think for most entry-level PM roles, you really don't have to have it. It's just a bonus. It is a plus. So I think there's a slight exception that if you're applying for maybe like a biotech firm's product management internship, probably helpful to not be as incredibly unknowledgeable as I am about how the human body works. Like it'd be helpful and possibly a requirement. But at most PM roles, especially for an entry level where they're willing to hire students, you're not going to need to have really deep domain experience in whatever it is that the company does. It's more about, are you going to be an effective product manager? And you'll learn the context of what they do while you're at the company.
Yeah, that's awesome. I agree. Unless Vaibhav or Lola disagrees.
No, I would just say the more senior you go in terms of recruiting for PM, I think the more important domain experience becomes because you're going to be leading a team, potentially teams, plural, and that domain experience really matters for that product or suite of products.
Yep. Okay, why don't we just do one final question and then we can wrap it up here. But there's a question very specifically about like learning about timelines of things. Any advice you can give there about like generally, how do I know where applications are, when they open, what to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like some tactical resources on Leland that sort of documents a lot of this. I'm pretty sure there's a website that's like PM deadlines or something that I've seen that also collates this. But I think you should have a point of view about what companies you want to go after and just do your diligence and do your research. So as soon as you sort of realize that, yeah, this is something you want to pursue, just make a list of 10 companies maybe that you're interested in to start and just start scouring their websites and the internet to find those deadlines. I think the best way to do that is using resources online and reaching out to people at the companies the best you can.
Yep, that's so good. Okay, well, I think we're at time, so why don't we wrap it up? Thank you everyone for joining. This was an incredible event and really appreciate our panelists and their thoughts.
Thanks, everyone. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.